I'm Stephanie Sickler. I'm an assistant professor and the foundations coordinator in the Department of Interior Architecture and Design at Florida State University, and this is A Student's Perspective.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of A Student's Perspective. I'm here with Stephanie Sickler, a professor at Florida State University. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, give a bit about your education and your background?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I have a Master of Fine Arts in Interior Design from Florida State University. And after graduate school, I taught at the University of Alabama for a number of years before my family and I returned to Tallahassee, Florida, where I have been teaching at FSU ever since. I'm an assistant professor. I go up for tenure this year, and I coordinate our foundations program. We have a limited enrollment program, and so there is a first-year experience that we curate for the students who wish to enter our program. It's pretty competitive, but it's a lot of fun. It's really rewarding to work with this first-year students.
Awesome. I understand that you did your undergrad in English. Could you talk a little bit about what made you decide to get your master's in interior?
Sure. Well, I, for a long time in undergrad, was working with the costume department. I wanted to go into costume design. And so I designed and constructed costumes for our ballet department at my college, and then also worked with the theater department in my college and did an internship at the Shakespeare Festival, which was actually pretty prestigious at the time. I didn't really realize it, but there was a day that I was in my internship and I loved it. I mean, it was one of the most fun things that you can do is work with costumes. And it just hit me one day that I didn't want to sew every day. I knew that I needed more education, to continue on in whatever field I was in. I just happened to have a lot of credits in English and a lot of, classes already completed in that degree. And so when I realized that I wanted to switch to interiors, I had the internship in costumes, but then also my part-time job, I worked with a designer in town. She had a retail store, and she's had like 3,000 bolts of fabric on the floor and furniture. And actually my big sister, my sorority, worked there, and it was a job that we all had kind of as a part-time job that got passed down in our group of friends. I know that sounds odd, but it did. And so I was really lucky, and I got to work there. When the internship was over, I started that job. And so just as a part-time thing, while I figured out, all right, well, I guess if I get this degree in theater, I'll have to be sewing. But what happened was when I worked in the fabric shop, I loved it. It was so fun. And it was like I could transfer all that knowledge and love for design with textiles that was originally rooted in theater and costume design to interiors. And that's when it hit me. So we didn't have interior design at my college. And so I finished with a degree in English because that was what I was closest to finishing. And actually, as a professor, it served me really well because we do a lot of writing. With grad students, we do a lot of editing. I published a book, so I didn't waste those years in undergrad, actually, as it happened. They've been quite useful. But so I went on and worked at that shop for that designer for 3.5 years while I was there. And then after school, I worked with her for a little while before I moved on to graduate school. So it was like a light bulb one day. It was not the way you plan things to go and when you're an undergrad, but it worked out okay in the end, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I think I remember one time we had like kind of not a career fair, but we had different vendors come into our school, and a lot of them were like fabric companies. And I remember one woman saying, well, interior design trends are usually based off fashion trends. So I think that's really cool that you kind of made that connection on your own, and you were like, oh, I love fashion, I love textiles, and you bring that into interior design, because I didn't realize they go so hand in hand, but it's so true. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you.
So how did you decide you wanted to end up teaching with your interior master's degree?
Well, that was another thing I didn't really plan. In graduate school, my husband was also doing graduate school here at Florida State when I was. And I originally came to FSU because they had a first professional degree. So because I didn't have an undergrad in interiors, I could, complete this really rigorous master's program that would get me the undergrad and grad school all at one time. But it wasn't a 3-year program, and my husband was in law school and his was going to be 3 years. So there came a point when I had the option to apply to convert my first professional master's degree to a Master of Fine Arts degree, which is considered terminal here at FSU. So it would only add on a little bit of time, and I could finish in 3 years like my husband did. So I thought, well, why not? One day when I'm, I don't know, 65 and I'm tired of working, I'll be ready to be a teacher. And this degree will serve me well. That's what I thought, which was really silly. So I applied, was accepted to stay on. And one of my assistantship assignments along the way, a few semesters into that degree, was my department chair came to me and she said, Stephanie, this semester you're going to teach AutoCAD. And I was like, I don't know about that. I'm a hand person. I'm real analog, I'm not the technology driven one that most people are. It didn't come naturally to me. I wasn't super great at it. A proficient like we all have to be, but I wouldn't say it was my forte. And I looked at her and I said, you really don't want me to do that. You want me to do something else, right? And she said, you really want to keep your assistantship, right? And I said, yes, ma'am, I do. And so my assignment was to teach AutoCAD that semester all by myself. And I was scared out of my mind. The faculty member that was responsible for me said, he came the week before class and he handed me the instruction, like the course pack. We didn't have a textbook, of course. It was AutoCAD 100 years ago. And so he gave me the course pack and he said, Stephanie, here's the course pack. Their assignments are in there. I'll see you at the end of this semester. And then he left. And it only took, I don't know, about 3 or 4 weeks of teaching that class to realize I absolutely loved teaching. And it was so bizarre because that wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what I got, what I signed up to do right away in my mind. People had always asked when I was getting an English degree, years before, because I took a break between undergraduate and grad school to work. People always asked, oh, what are you going to do with that degree? Are you going to be a teacher? And I was like, oh, no, I could never imagine myself. I'm not good with kids and so on. And I still can't imagine being like a K through 12 teacher. I don't have that gift, but something about teaching that class to those sophomores that year, it was just like a light bulb went off again and said, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. It's really rewarding, actually. You learn a lot. I learned more about AutoCAD that semester than I, had learned collectively prior to that. And so I just knew that I could do it. And, truly it wasn't what I set out to do when we graduated, but it was the time when the market was kind of weird. And so, we ended up in that job. It's just kind of stumbled into it. So it was a happy accident, I guess.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned that you published a book recently. Congratulations. The Soft Goods Guidebook for Interiors. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what that book was and what inspired you to write it?
Absolutely. So remember how I said I worked an undergraduate for the designer, and she had a fabric shop, and it was, was really fun. We got to create soft goods every day, and every day was new. Designers would come in, we'd work with them and their clients. Fabricators would come in, we would work with them. So in the time that I worked there as an undergrad, I learned how to calculate yardage for anything you could imagine making. I learned how to put fabrics together. I learned how to create, this is a weird sounding word, but pillowscapes. Most people don't think to call them that. But, we learned how to design with soft goods under their, tutelage, and working with the designers that would come in, and really developed a love for all the things, again, that were made with textiles. And so when I was, a new educator, years later, as that was, um, I was really surprised that we didn't teach much about designing with textiles. Um, I found that it wasn't something that, CETA was asking for as a line item. It wasn't something that the NCIDQ asks a lot about. So, I figured, well, I guess it must just not be that important. But in many sectors of design, your textiles are your bread and butter of space. That's what people respond to, with their sense of touch, or, they just have a tactile curiosity, right? Um, so when I was teaching, our capstone residential course at the University of Alabama at the time, and there wasn't a resource that I could use to teach students about designing with textiles. And so I, kind of made it my own, because they had to know it. And, as it happens, I had employers that would call as those students that graduated from our program and took that class with me. They would go on their interviews and job hunts, and they would find their employers would find out that they knew how to specify soft goods, which means it could calculate window treatments. They could determine yardage for bedding. Now, and most people think about bedding as a home thing, right? Residential design. But you need to do bedding in hospitality and other places. You need to do window treatments in all sorts of types of spaces, whether it's something super decorative for the home, or whether it's something that's just very functional in a commercial space for blocking out sound or sun or something. So I think people generally overlook that as an important design feature or tool. But I would have employers call me and say, this person doesn't have a super bubbly personality. I wonder if she'll be okay working with clients. And she said, so I want to get your take on it, but this person can specify soft goods. This person can calculate window treatments. They can be, helpful if I send them on an install. They know what they're looking for. And I said, yeah. And she said, how do they know that? And I said, we do it in my class. And she said, I've never come across anybody who had that knowledge coming out of school. And she said, it's so valuable. And I said, well, I promise you, she's a wonderful student. She's a wonderful person. She's just quiet, give her a chance. She did. And she worked there for years and years before she moved on. So that happened enough times that I thought, maybe we really need something like this that emerging designers can use, or designers that are already existing in the profession can use. Because really, truly, there isn't a place where you can go and find all the collective knowledge about, how do I use a fabric to design a drapery treatment? What are they called? How do I do it? What's the difference between a duvet and a coverlet? I specified a few wrong early on in my career, and you would order a bedspread, and what would come back would be a coverlet because you didn't know what a bedspread was. And then you're the one who's in trouble because, there's a certain language that you have to be able to speak with your fabricators. So it was a labor of love, and, I hope that it's something that people can use as they enter the profession as a reference, really, more than anything.
Right. I think I need to order that because there's so much I don't know.
Well, there is, and you just don't realize it because it's not something, I feel like sometimes we're afraid to talk about the decorative parts of our profession, but often that's part of what got you here in the first place. Your love
Right.
for something that's tactile or something that is beautiful when you walk in and you're just inspired by the way a room looks or something like that. And I think too often we get caught up in making sure that we're, being professional or making sure that we're teaching about health, safety, and welfare, that we overlook, all those really glamorous parts, I think, that we're kind of afraid to acknowledge about our profession. But they're wonderful parts that should be celebrated also.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really exciting because I think a lot of times we don't get into that till like much later after college and stuff, or just something that you pick up in internships or on your own. So having that all in one place is really, really awesome. And like, it would be nice to have a reference like that to go back to, and because it's exciting. It's not like it's boring. It's the fun part, like you said,
Right.
fun part to look at. So yeah. I asked you a little earlier, but I wanted to ask you about the textiles you have behind you that you do in your classroom. Could you just tell a little bit about those?
Sure. Let's see. So this is, I'm in the classroom where I teach my materials class, and, I really try to make this class a hands-on, like an applied learning lab setting. And so I find that it's really difficult to cover the breadth of materials that we have to specify at our disposal in one lecture, course over one semester. And so when I cover textiles, one of the things that we do is I teach the students how to hand block a print. So these are little swatches of linen, and the students were given a little rubber carving block where they carved their pattern. Well, they carved the motif into a block, and then they had to repeat it on their textile to create a pattern. Then they had to apply that pattern to a piece of furniture and create a whole project out of that. But for this year, and this is a project that we do every year in conjunction with Cravat. And so once the projects are completed, they send them to Cravat, and they pick a winner. All the furniture that the students selected are Cravat frames, and so the Cravat folks get to see the students' design inspiration on their pieces of furniture, and so it's a fun thing for them to see the creative process. But this year, I had the students, they have a studio class that they're taking at the same time as this class, and they were assigned a client in the studio class, a hypothetical client, and so. Another project that I work on is creating music from textiles and other soft materials, so the weaving code from it and the pattern. And so because I was so into music, Cravat, the folks at Cravat, Karen Lerman, and I decided that we would add music to this year's project. And so we curated my music colleague here at FSU, and I curated a playlist for each of the different clients that the students had in their studio project based on, their client profile. And so the students picked one piece of music that resonated with them and they thought was appropriate for their client. And from that music, they made the motif that you see there. And so it was all kind of interconnected back to the client. And so when they give their presentation about the fabric, they would play the music that they chose for inspiration in the background. And you could really see how it all tied together. That client's personality, the space that they created for them, and then the way that this textile really represented the kind of the overall vibe that they were going for in this space. It was a really fun project, and I was surprised that the students got so, I don't know, they embraced the aspect of the music being there. And I think it's just another sensory thing. Designers are intuitive, designers are feelers. We engage with multiple senses. And I think it was just another way for them to connect to their client. And I think that's why they had such a good time doing it.
Wow, that sounds like such a cool project. I feel like that's kind of similar to like projects we have here in the architecture school, but I think that's really awesome because I think if someone told me go design a pattern, I think you're kind of like, what? But you're really rooting on like having that concept to always reference back to when you're designing. And that's a lot of the projects we do here is like having that core concept that you can always refer back to. So you're not like just have like no boundaries at all, you know what I mean? So that's really awesome. I think that's so cool. And it's kind of like when you're looking for fabrics or wallpaper and you're like, well, I don't know if I really like this or what, I'm not sure if I really like that pattern, but you're like, oh no, make your own pattern. And I think that's really cool. Kind of similar how to you're like, I don't have a reference book to teach all these things about textiles, so you made your own. I think that goes so hand in hand with just being a designer in general. So that's really inspiring.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, so I know you're a member of IDEC. Could you explain that a little bit and your role in the council?
Absolutely. So Interior Design Educators Council, that's IDEC. They are the professional organization for folks that teach interior design at colleges and universities all over North America. So we have members from United States, Canada, so on and so forth. And it is one of my favorite organizations that I've ever been a part of because you may have already discovered that even though the design community is vast, we're still a tight-knit community. Educators are the same way, even more so. Coming up as a grad student, my major professor encouraged and maybe even required us to present our thesis work or to submit it for presentation at an IDEC conference because it was one of the ways that we could meet people in our profession, in our field. And it was one of the ways that we could get feedback on our work outside of what our faculty could offer us or our peers or so on and so forth. And so as a grad student, I became a member. I applied, I submitted an abstract of my thesis project and it was accepted. And so I presented my thesis at a regional conference. Just so happens that I was 9 months pregnant when that conference took place. And so it was really memorable for all the other people there as well as myself because I was about to have a baby. And so when I would go after that regional conference, I went to the national conference, which was the following spring. And, I was still a student, but everybody that I had met previously at the regional conference approached me and asked me, how is your baby? How did everything go? How is your thesis coming? And I had never felt so welcomed. I had never felt so supported as a person, as a professional, as a student, as all of these things. And that just kind of stuck with me. And so when I took the position at Alabama and I was offered an opportunity to join a professional organization as part of my role there, I immediately knew that IDEC was, who I wanted to be a part of because there's a lot of mentorship that happens within that group. There's a lot of teaching resources that are shared within that group. And as a new educator, you don't know what you don't know. There's so many ways to do something. And so I've been a member since 2009, and I can't even count all the ways that IDEC has supported me in my career. The friends I've made, Stephen introduced himself to me from a mutual connection that I have from IDEC. So it's a strong network of people all over the country. When I had students at Alabama, we didn't have a graduate program there. So when it was time to send students to, look for a graduate program who wanted to pursue a terminal degree or something similar, and I would send them to Florida State. But I also knew people all over the country because of my connections with educators through IDEC. And so I could help them, make that connection and take that first, that nervousness out of the step for them because I was helping make an introduction. Here's a school you should look at. Here's somebody you should go talk to, at all the different places around the country. And so over the years, I wanted to kind of pay back that which had been given, I felt, to me through IDEC. And so I would serve in different leadership roles, starting at the regional level, and then found myself in a service role at the national level. And then in 2018 was elected to the national board. And so I've served on the board of directors since then. And I love it. I love seeing how positive growth is brought to the organization. I love seeing how we can stretch our network into our students and show them that, the different ways that their future could manifest, the different leadership capacities they have within themselves as students, and potential. And then I love the support that it offers as a professional, and that I can now turn around and offer to our new faculty that come along. It's hard to wake up one day and realize you're in a leadership position when you still think of yourself as the newbie. But, it's been, I don't know, 12 years now? I guess I can't really claim that anymore. But it's a wonderful organization to be a part of. And I hope to continue to remain a part of IDEC for a long time.
Yeah, that sounds so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you do a lot of work with students, like one-on-one? Do you meet with a lot of students?
Do you mean at my institution or through IDEC?
Through IDEC, sorry.
Through IDEC? Well, actually, funny that you mentioned that. A couple of years ago, we had our national conference in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was right before the world kind of was upended due to the pandemic. It was literally like the last thing we all did. But something unusual happened at that conference that I hadn't seen happen before. I looked around the room in our opening night and I realized there were a lot of students attending the conference. We had graduate students that we always have, and we had new graduate students, and we had undergraduate students attending conference. They were there because they had won an award for a project that they did, and they were there to receive their award. And I just kept looking around thinking, where did all these students come from? And what are they going to do this week while they're here? And so I would approach them because I have kind of a soft spot for students. My position on the board of directors is the director of service. And so that encompasses not only celebrating the service that our educators do, to the profession, to the communities, to, whatever it is that they do in their role, celebrating those accomplishments, but also service to the membership and service to outside communities. So, one of the things that is important to me in service of our membership is, meeting the needs of our members, current and future. And so I'm looking around realizing that there are a lot more emerging educators here, or potential emerging educators, if we even look down into the gap that goes down from there to the undergraduate students. And I said, we've got to offer something for students because it is so valuable for them to be here, to see this network that exists to support them beyond their institution, to see the possibilities for, jobs and other things. And so I talked with my team in the Service Collaborative, and they said, oh my goodness, we 100% would love to offer programming to students. So I talked to the board of directors, and they said, 100% we would like to serve our students' needs more. And we said, okay, fine. So we did a survey to figure out, if students were to come to conference, more deliberately, what would they benefit from that we could offer? And so we put together from that survey 3 or 4 different events that we could engage with our students who would come to conference. So they would feel supported. They would feel that we had, curated material just for them to consume while they're there. And it turned out that our conference was virtual, so we did get a lot of one-on-one time, but it was like this, like you and I over the Skype here, and we were afraid that would kind of fall flat with some people, but as it turned out, they loved it, and we a student isn't something that you can put in a little box, right? Mm-hmm. Every student is different, and you could be 18 or you could be 80 and still be a student and be hungry for what's next. So, that's true in interior design, especially as people come, back for a second career, a third career, or who knows what. So we had a panel about what to expect, as your career develops, that we did for them. We had a mixer. It was a virtual mixer with all of our sponsors, because what student doesn't love to get, one-on-one time with a vendor where you can get samples or product knowledge or whatever you need for your resources. And we had another a CV review. So graduate students who were looking to maybe go into education or just looking for some insight on their CV could get that feedback from our seasoned educators. And it was so fun. It was wonderful. And they said to us, this is the first time you guys have really offered any stuff, programming just for us, and we love it. So we're planning even more of that for this upcoming conference, which is going to be in New York City in March. Undergraduates, grad students, anybody that has student in their name is welcome to come. But we want students to understand the value of IDEC, both to your educators while you're in school, but then to you as you enter the profession, whether you choose to become an educator or not. It's a wonderful resource. It's a way to connect education to practice. And so we try to engage with students as much as we can.
Wow, that's really great to hear, because you're kind of coming from that student's perspective as well as being their educator and then making that connection. Because I also wanted to ask you about High Point Market, because that is such a great time to make connections. It's all networking. So that's really awesome that you are so strong into getting just to bring that high level to the students and having a taste of what there is out there for us to do. Because as I said before, there's just so much that we don't know, or so much that's upcoming that that's just really nice to just hear everybody's story and get a taste of all that there is out there in the design world.
Oh, I was excited. My students, this market, I took a small group to High Point, I guess back in October, and we were sitting on a trolley, and I think a group of your students were on the trolley, and we were so tired. We'd had the longest day. And the group of students was talking about this really cool competition that they're doing. And I could see, we weren't all sitting together, but I could see my students kind of perk up and start listening. And they were like, that sounds like a really cool project. And I was like, I know, it really does. So we kind of eavesdropped a bit to hear what you guys are working on, which sounds really fun. We've not come to market before and participated in anything like that. I've kind of curated a itinerary for us that generally involves tours through Valdez Weavers, which is a jacquard textile mill. That's always a really exciting experience. And then we tour the Wesley Hall Furniture Factory, and then get to see, the fabrication of upholstered pieces, and that's very eye-opening. One of the reasons that I take students to High Point, kind of like you mentioned, was that firsthand knowledge that you can gain when you're early on in your career like that. There's nothing that will make something stick in your brain more than seeing it firsthand. If I want you guys to learn something, that I feel is really valuable, or if I want you to learn something that seems complex, or expand your understanding of, what jobs you could have when you graduate, the best way for me to do that is to put you in a situation where you learn that firsthand. And so that's kind of how I feel about High Point. I started taking students to High Point when I was teaching at Alabama, because I was teaching that residential capstone class, and those students are unfamiliar with the different vendors that were represented there. And so that's when I started going, and I met a lot of people through that experience, a lot of people that contributed to my book when it was time to have perspectives from industry. And so when I moved back to Florida State, I was able to keep taking student groups to High Point, and it became popular. And the year before the pandemic, we took 27 students to High Point,
wow.
Which I don't recommend. It's a really big group. I recommend in that 27 students had a really great time and learned a great deal. And we were able to do some fun things, but it's a lot of people to keep up with. When I started bringing students from Florida State, one of the other things that we do while we're there is we usually participate in a service charrette with students from UNCG, because they're there in Greensboro. A good friend of mine teaches there, and we put together an intercollegiate, charrette where they would partner with a community member there, and then they would design in kind of their the mixed teams of UNCG, FSU students would work together to put together some solutions for the needs of that community partner that was like our kickoff to market. And so we did that 2 or 3 times. We did it once virtually. And this year, the students weren't allowed to be on the UNCG campus. So this was the first year in a long time that we haven't done it. But that's another really great benefit of taking students from down here up there, because they get to see how students at a different design program operate, and they get to see their facilities and meet their faculty and engage. And then it's always their students are at a different stage in their education than mine are. So I think we've had second year students and grad students from UNCG, and I had third and fourth year students that would travel up from here. So it was always really fun to get them in groups and let them, work through problems and see how differently, they approached it just based on their year in school. And one of the best parts about High Point is the discovery that takes place when they're there. They look at me and they go, "Oh, I didn't know all this existed." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's great, isn't it?" And they get really excited and they think about all the stuff that's beautiful, all the ways that we can create, all of the tools that designers have at their fingertips. And also all of the resources, all of the reps, all of the business owners, all of the marketing people, all of the support folks that truly, exist within our industry that we don't talk about that often, but that are extremely valuable to rely on when you're in practice to make your business flourish, and to make your designs really magnificent. And so every year when we go, we always have a time when we sit down and have a meal together or something. And they always say, "Gosh, I can't believe I didn't know about this." Well, how would you know about this? Unless you lived up here or were in school in an area close by, and it was something that was really talked about. I would venture to say that in most interior design programs, most of your studio courses are focused on commercial design, and that's not really represented at High Point. It's more of the residential market. So it's a small segment of, your educational path. But for some people, it's a huge part of their practice when they're out in the world. And so the other really fun part is every year, since I've been taking students for so long, small groups, big groups, whatever, two different institutions, every time we go to High Point, I bump into alumni. And there's so many of them now that we see there that I don't remember sometimes. Did I teach them at Alabama? Did I teach them at FSU? How long ago did they graduate? But it always impresses the students to realize that network of us designers, right? Education, practice, whatever, is still so tight. You'll see somebody through a window that you haven't taught in, 6-8 years. And it's just this joy and this recognition. And it gives me a lot of joy to see that they're practicing, that they've joined with a firm or that they're on their own or whatever it is, and I think that sets a great example for students that are, current students, that they get to see the support, they get to see that network of professionals. So there's so much about High Point that is something I think every student should experience. If I could take every student, I would take every student, whether they intend to do anything with residential design or furniture or anything like that or not. Everybody should go. And if you don't like that, you should go to Neocon. If furniture and fabric isn't your thing, Neocon would do the trick for you otherwise, because it's just an experience you can't really put a price tag on.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to go to High Point this year with Steven. And like you said, meeting other students, I think, was really exciting. We got to meet the Auburn University students. They had a whole furniture they were going to school for furniture, which was a cool perspective to talk to them about. Just they get to fully dedicate all their time to that. So seeing their projects and how it kind of relates to our projects, and then meeting other students, we'll definitely remember each other for a long time and bump into each other. So I agree that networking is so cool, and it's just so valuable. And being in High Point, I was just so blown away by everything there. It was it was stepping like in a magazine, but like because everything was so close together that it was so nice. You could go like 10 feet and you were in a new category, and it was just so exciting to see everything. It's definitely overwhelming, but in a very good way.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, and there still was so much we didn't see, so it was just crazy. So
You'll want to go back next year.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much for talking with me today. Our final question would be, if you had any advice to give to your student self, what would it be?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. And I give this to my students now, so I would definitely have given it to myself. Take risks while you're in school. And I don't mean like risky behavior risks. What I mean is that I want you to take risks regarding what you think your limits of designing are, what you think your limits of where could I work, what could I do, what can I design, what tools are at my disposal. If you come to design school with only the sum total of your experiences so far, how are you supposed to grow much beyond what that represents? Look at the work that other designers are doing. Look outside of your field. Look at fashion. Look at furniture. Look at, engineering. There's so much that we can learn just from other industries and how they're moving forward. Take yourself on that trip, even if that means you have to eat peanut butter and jelly for the next 3 weeks. Go on that, opportunity. Take advantage of the opportunities that are there for you. And if that means that you need to do other things and really crunch one weekend and to get your time management under control, do that, because those opportunities that you could do while you're in school won't come around as easily as they will once you're out of school. College is the safest place to take risks with your the way that if you were to take a big risk on a studio project, right, and it didn't pan out, the worst thing that could happen is you'd have a bad grade on your studio project. Maybe. But that's not going to stick with you, right? You will have learned something from going through that process. Discovery. You'll learn, more about what works and what doesn't work. And you'll learn more about yourself as a person and as a designer. So risk-taking behavior regarding your profession, I think, is great. I wish I had known that it was okay to do that it was okay to try something that I wasn't 100% sure was going to work out, because I might push myself a little bit farther outside my comfort zone regarding the way that I design, and the way that I embrace the world around me. I would have gotten to where I am now a lot faster.
That's really good advice. Thank you.
Thanks. Sure.
All right, Stephanie. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And please tune in for more episodes in the future. And you're watching A Student's Perspective.